Hello and welcome back. I'm Mariam Saab. We're keeping an eye on Africa here on France 24. Our top stories from the continent tonight. The death toll in Somalia's truck bomb blast rises to 300. Many more are injured and scores still missing as rescue workers continue to dig victims out from beneath the scorched rubble in Mogadishu. The deadly plague outbreak in Madagascar is spreading at an unprecedented pace. As the epidemic threatens the country's largest cities, widespread panic complicates efforts to contain the crisis. Our journalist on the ground has the details. And Ethiopia's Simien Mountains National Park celebrates a milestone. After years of ecological elbow grease, it's finally shrugging off its status as a UNESCO World Heritage in danger site. But first, Somalia is still reeling from what authorities are calling the deadliest terror attack in the country's history. The toll from Saturday's truck bomb blast in Mogadishu's busy city centre climbing to some 300 dead. Local medics expect the number of casualties to rise further still, with hundreds more seriously injured and many still missing. Somalian government says the incident bears all the hallmarks of an al-Shabaab attack. However, the Islamist group has so far remained silent. Nicholas Jama has a story.
2 days after the attacks, parts of Mogadishu still look like they have been hit by an earthquake. The truck bomb killed more than 300 people. It's the deadliest attack in Somalia's history. Many of the victims were burned beyond recognition.
As you can see here, more bodies are gradually being found and removed from the rubble. There are other people who are still under the rubble. We've heard them as they scream for help. My biggest worry is that even the wounded are succumbing to their injuries. This is really a horrendous attack, and we must come together to defeat this enemy.
The government blamed al-Shabaab for the attack, but the jihadist group has yet to claim responsibility. Some analysts believe that al-Shabaab had possibly wanted to hit a government target, and that the bomb went off in a busy commercial district instead, killing so many civilians. This might explain why al-Shabaab has remained silent. On Monday, Somali rescue workers received aid from Turkey.
This is not the first time our Turkish brothers have sent a plane and taken wounded Somalis to Turkey to receive better treatment. At first, 70 wounded people will be transported to Turkey, then the plane will come back to take more of the injured. We also thank the Turkish government, who have sent us medical supplies delivered by this cargo plane.
Al-Shabaab were pushed out of the capital in 2011, but since then they have carried out numerous sporadic attacks. Last year, 723 Somalis were killed in nearly 400 attacks, according to think tank Sahan Research.
Well, it's been a couple of days and there's still no claim of responsibility for this horrific attack in Somalia. Earlier, we crossed to Nairobi, where Matt Bryden, a political analyst and a specialist in security across Northeast Africa, told us who he thinks is behind the bombing. Take a listen.
There is no other group in Somalia that has ever demonstrated the capacity to pull off this kind of attack apart from al-Shabaab. Or even the desire to do so. We also know that in the past, when al-Shabaab has struck targets that have killed large numbers of civilians and caused a public backlash, that the group has remained silent because they fear the repercussions. In this case, we still don't know, but I would be inclined to say that the group is conflicted as to whether or not to claim this attack. But there probably is no question that al-Shabaab is responsible.
Just a reminder, al-Shabaab have not claimed responsibility for this attack. Next, Kenyan police say they shot dead a street vendor caught up in demonstrations calling for electoral reform in the country's west. This Monday, protesters were tear-gassed by police in the opposition's stronghold of Kisumu after they allegedly set tyres alight, blocked roads and threw rocks. They vowed to continue, that's despite a government ban on protests. Well, according to Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, as many as 67 people have died in Kenya due to police brutality since the results of the August election were announced. Kenya's Supreme Court nullified that vote, voiding the disputed victory of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Tensions continue to run high 10 days ahead of a scheduled rerun of the presidential election. The Democratic Republic of Congo was one of 15 countries to be elected to the UN Human Rights Council on Monday. That's despite opposition from the United States and rights groups who challenge the so-called clean slate practice of member selection. Kinshasa will serve on the 47-member council as it investigates allegations of murder, torture, rape and the use of child soldiers in the Central African nation's own Kasai province. US Ambassador Nikki Haley slammed the election of DRC, saying it calls into question the very credibility of the council, which the US has in the past threatened to quit. In other news from the continent, the plague outbreak in Madagascar is continuing to spread at an alarming rate, with 63 deaths and at least 610 reported cases. The World Health Organization has ranked it a grade 2 epidemic, a warning that there is a high risk of it spreading even further. A national response plan has been put in place by the authorities. However, growing fear and panic amongst the population is complicating efforts to contain the crisis. Gail Bourget reports.
A huge cleanup operation is underway and everyone's rolled up their sleeves. This congregation from a nearby church is lending a helping hand to the municipality. The fire brigade is tasked with exterminating the rats whose fleas carry the plague. But in one of the world's poorest capitals, hygiene isn't a top priority.
There's a problem. It's poverty. We don't think about cleaning, we think about what we'll eat today and tomorrow. That is the issue.
At this factory, 4 people have contracted the pneumonic plague. It's the most serious form of the disease. If left untreated, it can kill a patient within 24 hours. A team from the Ministry of Health must disinfect an area the size of 2.5 football fields and treat 1,600 employees. However, some people have grown afraid of the disinfection teams.
When people see us wearing the equipment, they run away from us and don't want to answer us, because we're the team that's there to fight the plague.
Finding the homes of the patients who give random addresses is another problem. The intervention team took 2 hours to find this house. The patient's sister is embarrassed.
Yes, of course it's shameful. It's kind of a disgrace. The disease never existed in Madagascar. I feel ashamed of what people think.
Knowledge is the only weapon against ignorance.
Can we speak to you for 5 minutes? It's to give you information on the plague.
Every day, community representatives go door to door to raise awareness amongst residents.
The Ministry of Health was alerted only 13 long days after the first plague-related death, an embarrassing delay for the authorities who just 3 weeks ago claimed the plague outbreak was under control.
Gail Bourget reporting there from Madagascar. Next, Liberian parties began internal talks on Monday on whether to back former international footballer George Weah or incumbent Vice President Joseph Boakai in a November 7th runoff for the country's presidency. Well, whoever wins the second round of voting will replace President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. That's Africa's first elected female head of state. She's stepping down after a maximum of 2 terms. The handover would represent Liberia's first peaceful transfer of power in more than 7 decades. Well, a bit of much-needed good news to wrap up with an ecological success story coming out of Ethiopia. The country's Simien Mountains National Park was one of the world's first heritage sites to be heritage listed by UNESCO back in 1978. However, due to the decline of some of its native species, it was later added to the list of World Heritage Sites in danger. Well, thanks to more than 2 decades of hard-fought for conservation work, it's no longer at risk. Nathalie Tissot reports.
Spanning 400 square kilometers, Simien Mountains National Park is one of Ethiopia's most storied tourist destinations.
This becomes one of the stronghold of the species which has become under extinct. The one which is Walia ibex, which is found only in these places, and the Gelada monkeys. They prefer these places because of this terrain. They want to protect themselves from a hyena or predator.
Beyond the usual predators, the animal population has faced threats from hunting and overgrazing, and this road that cuts across the park. Nearly 20 years ago, the site was added to the list of World Heritage Sites in danger. These days, a new bypass road is under construction and has displaced part of the human population here.
There was a village which was called Gitsch, and this was a long process to work with them, to convince them to move out of the park.
The government has financed the relocation of 212 households beyond the park's border, but 4,500 remain on site. Thanks to conservation measures, the numbers of gelada monkeys and the woolly ibex have increased, but animals like the Ethiopian wolf remain in peril.
We are really grateful for the effort the government is making, but off the list is just a start. We have to maintain the park to be off the list, so we need even more efforts. It's not only the government, the people and the international community.
But beyond this international recognition, the Ethiopian government is looking for a bump in tourism, hoping to attract even more people to this national park that draws 25,000 visitors each year.
Nature at its very finest right there. Well, that's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up on France 24. Do stay with us.